Hello everyone, welcome to the U.S. Immigration News. In 2025, the United States is undergoing a landmark shift in immigration policy. At the center of this transformation is the newly introduced Trump 2025 Immigration Bill, an expansive legislative overhaul that aims to reshape border security, visa eligibility, humanitarian protections, and the relationship between federal and local enforcement. In today's video, we will review the 4 most consequential changes proposed by this bill and how they're already impacting immigrants, applicants, and families across the nation. Whether you're currently navigating the immigration system or simply seeking to stay informed, this update provides the context and clarity you need to understand the road ahead. If you are liking this video, please hit the bell button, subscribe, and like it so that you may get updates straight to your smartphone. Now let's get into the video. Number 1. Major expansion of border enforcement and detention capacity. At the forefront of the new legislation is an unprecedented expansion of border enforcement efforts. The bill allocates tens of billions of dollars for the construction of additional barriers along the U.S.-Mexico border, including previously unbuilt sections through environmentally and legally sensitive terrain. The Department of Homeland Security has already initiated the hiring of thousands of new Border Patrol agents, ICE officers, and customs officials to support this expanded infrastructure. Moreover, the bill authorizes the deployment of military personnel to assist in logistical and surveillance operations at the border, effectively formalizing a role that was previously temporary and reactive. The construction of new high-capacity detention facilities is also underway. When completed, these facilities will increase the national detention capacity to 100,000 individuals, nearly double the current threshold. This raises substantial questions about oversight, access to legal representation, and conditions of confinement. Additionally, the legislation expands the scope of expedited removal, which allows the government to deport individuals without formal court proceedings. Legal advocates have expressed concern that this will diminish due process protections and increase the likelihood of wrongful deportations. These developments collectively signal a robust shift toward heightened enforcement, faster removals, and larger-scale detentions at the U.S. border. Number 2. Significant new financial barriers to entry and relief. Equally significant are the financial burdens introduced by the Trump 2025 bill. For the first time in the country's modern immigration history, asylum applicants are now required to pay a $1,000 fee to submit their claims. This policy took effect immediately following the bill's passage and has already had chilling effects in communities along the southern border. Beyond asylum, the legislation imposes additional financial requirements on several categories. Sponsors of unaccompanied minors must now pay a $3,500 sponsorship fee, with an additional $2,500 penalty assessed if the child fails to appear at a scheduled court hearing. Humanitarian parole applicants are subject to a $1,000 processing fee. Fees for work permits, visa renewals, appeals, and green card adjustments have also been substantially increased. Advocacy groups argue that these financial requirements effectively price out low-income individuals from seeking protection or legal status. Immigration attorneys across the country have reported a sharp uptick in clients abandoning or postponing their cases due to an inability to pay. Proponents of the bill contend that the U.S. immigration system should be fiscally self-sustaining and not rely on taxpayer subsidies. Critics counter that the legislation unfairly penalizes the most vulnerable populations. Either way, these cost-related changes introduce a powerful new barrier to legal immigration in the United States. Number 3. Elimination of legal pathways and humanitarian protections. The Trump 2025 bill also calls for the dismantling of long-established humanitarian protections and the narrowing of legal immigration channels. Two of the most consequential targets of the legislation are the Deferred Action for Childhood Arrivals (DACA) program and Temporary Protected Status (TPS). Both programs are scheduled for termination under the new law, placing hundreds of thousands of individuals, many of whom have lived in the United States for decades, at risk of removal. In addition, the bill substantially curtails the use of humanitarian parole and reduces refugee admissions to historic lows. Nonprofits and refugee agencies are already preparing for a dramatic contraction in resettlement activity. The legislation also restricts family-based immigration. Under the new framework, U.S. citizens may no longer sponsor siblings, married children, or parents under standard preference categories. Spousal and minor child sponsorship remains, but with increased documentation and background requirements. Employment-based immigration is also tightening. The number of high-skilled visas, such as H-1Bs and EB-2s, is being reduced, and the vetting process is being intensified. Applicants from countries deemed adversarial, such as China, Iran, and Russia, are facing increased scrutiny and longer adjudication times. Even international student visas are now subject to greater restrictions, with consulates reporting higher rates of application denials and interview cancellations. In sum, the legislation is designed not just to curb unauthorized migration, but to constrain legal immigration across nearly all categories. Number 4. Federal immigration enforcement now extends to state and local levels. The final and perhaps most controversial provision of the Trump 2025 bill is its expansion of immigration enforcement authority to state and local governments. The law significantly increases the number of 287G agreements, which authorize local law enforcement agencies to carry out certain federal immigration functions. These agreements are being rapidly expanded in jurisdictions across more than 20 states. Local officers under this framework may now initiate immigration detainers and conduct immigration status checks during routine arrests. This has raised alarms among civil liberties groups, who warn of racial profiling and community mistrust. Additionally, the legislation contains provisions that withhold federal funding from so-called sanctuary cities, jurisdictions that limit cooperation with federal immigration authorities. Several mayors have warned that the loss of federal grants will undermine essential services in their communities. The bill also revives the Victims of Immigration Crime Engagement Voice Office, a controversial entity created to highlight crimes committed by undocumented immigrants. Critics contend that it promotes a distorted and stigmatizing narrative, while supporters argue it gives a voice to crime victims who feel overlooked. Other enforcement enhancements include higher visa bond requirements, expanded penalties for harboring or assisting undocumented individuals, and stricter interagency data sharing mandates. This integration of local law enforcement into the federal immigration apparatus represents a significant shift in the relationship between communities and the federal government, and may have far-reaching legal and social consequences. The Trump 2025 immigration bill represents a comprehensive transformation of U.S. immigration policy. Supporters view it as a necessary correction, one that strengthens national security, restores order, and prioritizes economic self-reliance. Opponents argue that it threatens civil liberties, undermines humanitarian principles, and fundamentally alters the nation's identity as a destination for immigrants. Regardless of political perspective, the scope of this legislation is unmatched in recent decades, and its implementation is already underway. For millions of individuals navigating the U.S. immigration system, the path forward is now more complex, costly, and uncertain. If you are currently applying for a visa, green card, asylum status, or any immigration benefit, staying informed and seeking legal counsel is now more critical than ever. The policies are changing rapidly, and the stakes are higher than they've been in a generation. That's all we have for this bulletin. The U.S. Immigration News Channel provides all necessary visa information and procedures for your U.S. immigration journey. It is important to understand the United States immigration processing steps, visa application requirements, processing times, forms, fees, and more. We will continue to provide all information about U.S. visitor visas, such as B1 and B2, work visas such as L1A, L1B, and H1B, student visas, green cards, immigrant visas, EB1, EB2, EB3, EB4, and EB5, and family immigrant visas. If you haven't already, please subscribe to the U.S. Immigration News channel. Thank you for watching, and we'll see you in the next video.